When Tsagani spoke today, I was saying to myself, I wonder what the women of South Africa say about themselves. Are they saying, I am somebody? I don't know. Are you somebody? Somebody nyana, she says. It's really this, the point she was making, that we said we've got an absolute imperative to make sure that we are somebody, to liberate ourselves from a definition given to us by other people, to say we are determined to liberate ourselves from poverty, from backwardness, from ignorance, from a definition of ourselves by another person. So that, like Jesse Jackson, we can say, I am somebody. That it's not enough for us to have these correct policies. We must have the capacity to achieve what we say in terms of those policies. So I said, I'd like to say that after she said we must have a capacity to implement the policies that we decide upon. I don't know if we have discussed this today, particularly in our last session. What policies do we have for women's emancipation, women's empowerment in this country? And what are we doing to implement those policies if they are correct policies? I doubt if we've discussed that. If we don't, we will not be able to answer, to say this thing that I am somebody. She's right. We need to have the capacity to implement the right things that we say about ourselves. There are other people in this country who don't want that to happen. You know, when I come, as everybody knows, I come from the ANC. So when we won the elections in 1994, we had a big celebration at the Carlton Hotel here in Johannesburg. Big celebration, free at last, free at last. I think we didn't pay close enough attention to the fact that not everybody was celebrating with us. There are some people who had been fighting us all of these decades who were not celebrating, who were saying to themselves, these ones are celebrating because they think they've won a war, whereas in fact they've won a battle. We will win the war. So, part of what she's talking about, the absence of capacity, is because there are some people in our country who never celebrated 1994 with us, who said that the war, they will win the war, who've made their effort, their task to make sure that the capacity we want to develop doesn't happen. And some of them wear ANC t-shirts like me. But are very busy making sure that we don't develop this capacity that Tsagani was talking about. I'm raising that because I think it's, as a women's movement, it's a task that we must set ourselves to do what she said, but understanding that we have an open freeway. There's somebody there who's standing there who's trying to make sure that we don't succeed. So we must really take this message that I am somebody. It means you have a certain level of commitment which says, I refuse to be defined by another. I am somebody. Last year we celebrated the 30th anniversary of our liberation, democracy. So I was asked by many people, journalists at home, abroad, organizations, to say something about 30 years of democracy in South Africa. So there were too many of the requests. So I thought that the best thing to do is to have one place to respond to all of these questions, rather than do 200 individual interviews. So we had a public meeting at Freedom Park at the end of April last year. So I talked about 30 years of democracy. But as I was talking, you can't avoid the conclusion that the country, after 30 years of liberation, is in trouble. You can't avoid it. The economy is in a bad state. I hear people talking about green shoots. I don't see them. Levels of unemployment are increasing. Levels of poverty are increasing. This issue about the emancipation of women and development, progress has been made, but what kind of progress? Can't avoid the conclusion that the country is facing very serious challenges. And indeed, I would say the mood among our people between day one of liberation, April 1994, and day whatever, April 2024, the mood among our people has gone down. So what kind of liberation is this? The capacity we have, we want the political capacity to govern, and therefore to use that political power to do these things. But no, the political power we had 30 years later, we're down there rather than up there. So it seemed to me that therefore we, as a country, we face an emergency. And an emergency, you can't respond to an emergency by resorting to business as usual. So it seemed to me that there's something that we hadn't done. There is this very important principle of international law, the right to self-determination, the right of peoples to determine their future. So it seemed to me that we had come to that point, that looking at what has happened in South Africa for 30 years, it's necessary to come back to the people of South Africa to exercise their right to self-determination. Not to depend on Thabo Mbeki, the politician, or another politician I won't mention by name. But to say, we as the people of South Africa, what kind of South Africa do we want? And what kind of South Africa do we not want? That it was time that we should let the people speak to respond to this, what really is a crisis. So I said then that there must therefore be a national dialogue. And I said then that I was going to speak to various foundations in the country, thinking that I think this would be an important intervention, to ask them to take ownership of this suggestion. So indeed I spoke to them, the Luthuli Foundation, Desmond and Leah Tutu Foundation, Oliver Tambo, Adelaide and Tambo Foundation, Mlambo Foundation, Mbeki Foundation, all of them. Sobukwe Trust, Bigo Foundation, to say to them, isn't it time that the people of South Africa get together to speak for themselves, not be represented by somebody else, to speak for themselves and say, this is South Africa we want. And therefore, let's have a national dialogue. So fortunately, they all agreed and took this matter on board. So this is now their project. I think, colleagues, that the most important event in South Africa this year, 2025, will be the national dialogue. The foundations have been meeting, working on this matter. And what they are saying to me is, unfortunately, the President of the Republic, President Ramaphosa, has said this a number of times, that there will be a national dialogue. And even the current government supports that idea. So what will happen is that there will be constituted a preparatory committee. The preparatory committee will prepare for what is called a national convention, where all the South Africans get together. It has the preparatory committee will identify different constituencies. One of them will be women. And it will say the women will have 50 delegates at the National Convention. Then it will say trade unions, there will be 50 delegates from the trade unions, youth, and so on. Artists, traditional leaders, traditional healers, the totality, academics, intellectuals like Pulenge, Lengabolaye, the faith communities. So you'll have this massive gathering of South Africans in these various delegations who must answer the questions, two questions. What South Africa do we want? What is the South Africa we don't want? Fortunately, President Ramaphosa has said publicly that what comes out of the national dialogue, because it's the people of South Africa who will be speaking, must be binding on the governments of the day. That's the importance of the national dialogue. What has happened, as far as I know, is that of the women's organizations, SAWID has had a number of preparatory meetings to prepare for that time of this dialogue. I'm really suggesting that I think it would be very good if all of us here as a women's movement get in touch with SAWID. Because the suggestions we are putting here as to what should happen with regard to this matter of gender equality, women's emancipation, and all of that must become part of the national dialogue. Not just here. We must put them there as part of the national dialogue so that the people of South Africa as a whole must agree that as a country, we are committed to do the following things with regard to women. That's going to require a very strong, very thoughtful, very well-informed women's delegation at that national dialogue. And the brains that are in this room have this whole day have to be part of that. So practical, I'm suggesting that, I don't know whether the Thabo Mbeki Foundation can help, but all of us, I think, need to get in touch with SAWID. We had started the process of putting all of the women together to say at the national dialogue, as women, what will we say? What are our demands? Not just about women only and women's issues, about any issue in the country. So I'm making that appeal that as we're about to conclude our meeting, we find ways and means to participate, to ensure that we're able to participate in this forthcoming national dialogue, and particularly through this particular route, to be part of the process of the constitution of that delegation, part of the process of detailing the agenda which that delegation will put to the national dialogue on any matter, not just women, so that indeed we make the necessary impact on what South Africa should look like tomorrow. And this is absolutely, absolutely the only way we're going to turn the curve upwards. I'm saying 1964 we were there, and we improved up, and then we went down. I think in order to go up there, we need this national dialogue. And for it to succeed, truly to succeed, this women's voice has got to be very, very much central to the definition of the South Africa we want and the South Africa we don't want. A happy International Women's Day. Thanks a lot.